Welcome back everyone for another video from the StreamNative Academy. In the previous two videos we took a look at how you can get started with Apache Pulsar and also how you can create your producer applications in order to ingest some data inside Apache Pulsar. In this video we're going to switch our focus and take a look at the consumer side of Apache Pulsar. We are going to create a simple producer and then we can take a look at the subscription modes that Apache Pulsar offers, and it's a way that Apache Pulsar implements different messaging and streaming patterns. And so without further ado, let's go to our IntelliJ and let's create a new package over here and let's call it consumers. And let's create a new Java class and let's call it simple consumer. And let me just create my main method inside here. And so if you remember from the previous video on the producers, we had some steps over here and we're going to more or less do the same steps that we did here, but instead of creating a new producer we're going to create a new consumer. So let's start. What I have done is if you remember in every main method we're always instantiated the Pulsar client. So in here in the utils I created this client utils helper which just instantiates the Pulsar client, so we can retrieve it from here. So the first thing I want to do is use this client utils and just instantiate the Pulsar client. And let's handle this exception and extract that to a variable and let's call it a Pulsar client. And so like previously when we had the producer, right now we're going to use the Pulsar client and we're going to create a new consumer out of it. And in the same way you created the producer, we want to use the schema, the JSON schema method, and we want to specify the stock ticker class so we can read JSON messages of stock ticker data. And then some things we need to specify is the topic, which is going to be the single topic that we had, and then as with the producers, with the consumers as well, I like to specify a name for my consumer, and so let's call it stock tickers consumer. And then you can see over here there are too many options you can specify. For now I want to specify the initial position, and you can see that for the subscriptions we have either you can use the earliest or the latest. The earliest is going to read the first available message that you have for your topic, and the latest is going to read all the new ones. So I'm going to go with earliest, and let's also provide the name for our subscription, and let's call it test subscription maybe. And the last thing I want to do is subscribe, and let's just extract this to a variable and let's call it consumer. So now with our consumer in place, we need to set a while loop. So we want to keep reading messages as long as we have messages available. And so the consumer provides for us this receive method over here, which returns messages from the brokers, and let's extract that to a variable and call it message. Message. And when we receive a new message, what we want to do is use our consumer and we want to manually acknowledge the message, and we can do it by using this method over here. But when we try to acknowledge our message, things could go wrong, and for that I'm going to wrap that into a try catch block. and I want to handle the exception. So in case I get an exception, what we want to do is user consumer and return a negative acknowledgement back to our broker using this method. And this lets the Pulsar know that we didn't successfully acknowledge the messages, and so it will keep trying. And let's also keep a counter of how many messages we have received. Let's go to 0, and let's add some print statements down here for debugging purposes. And let's say that the total messages executed so far are message count, and let's also print the message ID execute message let's do something like that. And let's also over here increment the counter after its acknowledgement. So right now we are ready to run our first consumer, so I'm going to start this. First let's go and start our Pulsar cluster using the Docker image. We're going to use this command and give it a little while. And let's run our consumer again, and we are also going to run the async producer that we created on the previous video. So I'm going to start this. We're sending the messages, and as you can see here, we are successfully reading all the messages again. And you can see that we have read that many messages, and this is how many messages we have sent. I should probably change the counter over here to increment before that, but yeah. So now that we have created our simple consumer, if we go to the official documentation page of Apache Pulsar, and let's see if it's under the messaging, and over the subscription sections you can see that we have 4 different subscriptions provided for Apache Pulsar. And this is the way, as I said before, that Apache Pulsar implements different messaging and streaming patterns. So at first we have this exclusive subscription over here, which basically means that for each Pulsar topic and to one subscription, we can only have one consumer. We can never attach another consumer to that subscription. So there will always be just one consuming application. After that, we have the Failover Subscription, where again we have only one consumer reading for the subscription at any point in time. But in case that consumer crashes, then you have another consumer that is going to keep up and continue the work of reading messages. Then we have the Share Subscription, where you can have multiple consumers at that one subscription, and each consumer is going to take a subset of the work. And lastly, we have the Key Shared, which is exactly like the Share Subscriptions, where you have multiple consumers, but each consumer is going to receive a subset of the key. So you have all guarantees there that all the same keys are going to be processed from the same consumer every time. And if you want to dig into more details, you can read the documentation over here. But we're going to simulate this behavior through our Java examples. And for that, what I have done is you see we have this consumer logic over here. So I have extracted it into this consumer thread class that we're going to reuse to start different consumer threads to read for our applications. And this class basically holds the consumer, the total messages for its consumer, some delay we're going to add so we can better view the messages, and this boolean flag whether it's running or not. The constructor just accepts some arguments and just instantiates the consumer. It registers a shutdown hook, which is this method over here, so we can close the resources when we are done. We have this helper method to add some delay to our program. This disconnect, which basically turns the flag to false and starts our consumer loop, which is basically this one over here. It's inside the run method. We'll keep reading messages while the flag is true. And if we specify some delay, it's going to do a thread sleep over here. Otherwise, we keep reading messages using this receive method as we saw, and we acknowledging the messages and doing some print statements. So with that in place, let's go and see our first subscription mode, and it's going to be the exclusive one. So let me go ahead and create a new Java class over here, and we're going to call it exclusive consumer. And let's just add our main method, and for this example I'm going to instantiate my client, the Pulsar client, again as in the previous one. Let me just handle this exception and extract that to a variable. And after that we have our Pulsar client, I'm going to try and create two consumer threads, because as you remember, for the exclusive subscription we can only have one consumer attached to the subscription at any point in time. So when I try to create two consumers, the second one should fail to start. And so let's return a new consumer thread, and it takes Pulsar client as an argument. Then we have the topic name, which is the app config and single topic, and then we need to provide the subscription name, and let's take the same name that we provided here, and it's going to be the subscription. Okay, not like that. And then we're going to provide the consumer name, and for that we're going to use the ID. And lastly, we need to provide the subscription type, and it's going to be exclusive. And in the previous consumer we created, if you remember, we didn't specify the subscription type, and by default when you don't specify one, it's by default the default one is exclusive. And so that we have created our threads, for each one of them, let's just start them. So what I'm expecting here is, if I try to run this this program right now, it's going to try and create two consumers, and so the second one should fail. As you can see over here, exclusive consumer already connected, and it fails for the second one. And if I also run the async producer, you can see that we have the exactly same behavior like before. And so let's move on, and let's review now the Failover subscription. And we're going to create again a new class, and we're going to call it Failover consumer. And let me just add my main method inside here, and we are going to copy and paste the code we have here. And for this example, I'm going to try to start three consumers. And as you remember, on the failover we have one consumer running for the subscription and the other two should be used as failovers. And what I want to do now is, instead of returning the consumer thread over here, I'm going to extract it to a variable and let's call it consumer thread. And for each consumer thread I'm going to add some delay so we can see the results better, and then I'm going to return it. And instead of starting the threads immediately, let's first collect them to a list, and let's call this list consumer threads. Okay, not like that. And all for each of our threads, let's go now and start them. And now that our threads have started, what I want to do is I want to iterate over them. And I want to iterate over them. Okay, let me just fix this. Because I want to simulate, I want to add some delay over here, and I want to, after 10 seconds, I want to start killing my consumer threads one by one until I only have just one left. So what we should see, we're going to use disconnect method from the consumer thread that we have over here to disconnect our consumer. And the behavior we're expecting to see right now is that we want the first consumer thread to start reading the messages, and after 10 seconds we're going to kill it, and so we should see the second one take over, and again after a little while kill the second one, and then see that the third one keeps resuming with the work. So if I try to run this class right now and also start my async producer, okay, you can oh, okay, sorry, I have done a silly mistake over here. Let me just first run the simple consumer. So over here in the failover we need also to change the subscription type to failover. So let's try and run this class again, and let me also start my producer, and you should see that consumer one starts taking up the work, and after a little while you can see that consumer is disconnected and consumer 2 continues with the work. And if we wait a little longer, you see that consumer 2 is disconnected again, and then consumer 3 resumes with the work. And this is the behavior we were expecting to see. So that is, let me just run the consumer here. I'm only doing that to clear the messages from my topic, so I don't keep reading the old messages, since we have the same subscription name. And now the next one is the shared consumer. So let's create a new Java class for that as well, and we're going to call it shared consumer. And let's create PSVM, our main method, and again I'm going to copy and paste the code I have over here. And let's handle the exception, and let's start 5 consumer threads this time, and we're going to use the shared subscription. And what we expect to see is that after running this program we should have 5 consumer, and each of these consumers processing around the same amount of data from the partition. So if I start this and also start my async producer, we're going to send all the messages, and you should see that all the consumers are running, and each one of them is using a subset of the data. So let me just no, not this one, let me just grab my calculator over here. So let's see, we have our consumer one, which has read these messages, and then if we search for consumer 2, and consumer 2 has these messages, you can see that more or less it's on the same amount of messages. And then consumer 3, and for consumer 3 we have these, and then consumer 4, and we have this for consumer 4, and lastly we have consumer 5, and for consumer 5 we have this one. And if we sum all of this up, okay, I think I missed something here. Yeah, let's see, for consumer 5 we should have more actually, because there were less messages. So let me just do it one more time. For consumer 1, consumer, let's double check this. Okay, we have this. I should have missed the numbers. Consumer 2, it's somewhere okay, let me search it. For consumer 2 we have this, and then consumer 3, it should have more, I guess. Yeah, let's see a little, it should be this. And then if we go to consumer 4, I guess it should be more than this. Okay, and for consumer 5, we have this number. And if we add all of this up, you can see it's the expected result over here. So we can see that successfully all of our consumers have given a subset of the data and processed it successfully. And after that, we're going to go with the last one, and it's going to be the key shared consumer. And okay, no. And like in the previous example, we're going to have 5 consumers, so we're going to copy and paste this. And this time we are expecting that each one of the consumers is going to handle one key. So let's handle the exception and change this to key shared. So if we try to run this, we should expect that one consumer is reading one key, because we have 5 keys and we have 5 consumers. So let me just try and rerun my sync producer over here, and we're going to observe something strange right now. We're sending all the messages, but as you can see, for example, for consumer 3, we would expect that it only processes just one key. But over here, we can see that consumer 3 processes both Google, Facebook, or Apple, and Amazon, and Microsoft. So why is that? Why is this behavior? And the reason this happens is that on our async producer, you can see that we have batching enabled. And when we have batching enabled, we need to specify one more option for this to work. And this is the batch builder. You can see that we have one create for ads, and it is the key based. And what this key based batch builder does, it ensures that when create batches of messages with the same keys end up in the same batches. And before we didn't specify that, and this is the way that batches contain different keys together, and and for that reason our application misbehaved. So if we try to run our key shared consumer again, and we are going to start our async producer again, but with batch builder of key shared. You can see this time, sorry about that, you can see that this time our consumer, for example, consumer 1 only processes Google, and the way to verify it, let me just go to the implementation here, and I'm going to paste this. This is how much record we have for each stock, and you can see for Google, for example, we have written, this is the number of the total stocks that Google has, and this is the name that our consumer 1 processed. And if we scroll a little bit up, let's find another one. Let's go for consumer 2, let's say, and consumer 2 is engaged with the Microsoft ones, and for Microsoft we have again the same number, as you can see. And let's go for consumer 3, and consumer 3 is involved with Apple stocks, and for Apple we should have some more over down here. So let me just find this. If we scroll a little bit, where are you? Again, the same number for Apple. And then if we go to consumer 4, which is involved with Facebook stocks, let's search, again the same number. And lastly, for consumer 5, it is involved with Amazon, and for Amazon we have these many ones. So you can see that this is something you need to keep in mind when you use batching. You need also to provide the key-based batch builder in case you want to use the key share subscription. And you can see that we have successfully had one consumer processing messages for each individual key. So that's it for this video, and thank you so much for your attention. We went through again through the consumers and the subscriptions, and for every question you have, feel free to post them below the video, and see you in the next one. Bye.